I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The first thing I noticed was the cashier's hand on my wrist. Not rough or rude, just firm enough to stop me as I reached for the small sheet cake I had saved for. He leaned over the scratched counter and lowered his voice until it was almost a breath. "Are you Susan Miller? Are you Joshua's mother?" I nodded because my voice had slipped somewhere behind my ribs. The fluorescent lights of Harrison's grocery hummed above us, casting everyone in that sickly, pale glow that makes even the healthiest people look ill. He gave me a quiet warning about my daughter-in-law's family, about how they spent freely while calling my son for help every month. His eyes held the kind of worry you only see on people who have watched something wrong for too long. Then he let go and kept scanning as if nothing at all had happened. "That'll be $18.75, ma'am," he said at normal volume, sliding the cake into a white box with practiced hands. I fumbled with my wallet, the worn leather soft against my fingers. This cake had cost me a week of careful budgeting, but Joshua's birthday deserved a proper celebration. I handed over a $20 bill, trying to keep my hand steady. "I'm David Parker, by the way," the cashier added quietly while counting my change. "I've seen what they do. Your son deserves better." I pushed through the side door into cold Ohio wind and tried to breathe. The parking lot hummed with afternoon noise, carts rattling, engines idling. A child crying after a balloon slipped into the sky. I should have gone straight to my son's car where he was waiting, but curiosity pressed on my chest like a weight. I circled the loading dock and slipped behind 2 green dumpsters that smelled like old oranges and bleach. From there, I could watch the front without being seen and decide whether the warning was kindness or gossip. 2 minutes later, I saw William Thompson, my daughter-in-law Rachel's father, push through the automatic doors with 3 glossy black bags that glinted like wet stone. Gold letters on the sides caught the light. They were not grocery bags. They were designer. From where I stood, I could make out the Gucci logo. He moved easily, not like a man buried under overdue notices, and clicked a key fob until a new pale SUV chirped and flashed. He stacked the bags in the trunk with the care people use for glass, then took a phone call with the relaxed smile of someone who believes everything will work out in his favor. "Yeah, got them. Rachel will love the purse," he said, voice carrying across the parking lot. "No, don't worry about the cost. Joshua just sent another check for Patricia's medication. We're covered." My stomach dropped to my sensible shoes. I am 68, a retired nurse from a small clinic in Columbus, and I have counted pennies all my life to make sure my boy had what he needed. The arthritis in my knuckles flared with the cold, but I stayed frozen in place, watching William laugh into his phone. Joshua married Rachel 3 years ago. I told myself she was simply reserved, the way some people are when they step into a new family. Her father was always polite. Her mother always asked about my health. Yet requests kept arriving at my son's door. There were stories about rent, medicine, and car repairs. Small fires that needed cash fast. Joshua hates to see anyone struggle. So do I. It's how I raised him, working double shifts after his father died when Joshua was only 7. Now the cashier's whisper circled my head and refused to unclench. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was jealousy. Or maybe I had trained myself for decades to ignore alarms because peace felt safer than questions. I stayed there until my legs cramped, watching and listening, promising I would not accuse anyone until I saw enough truth. Like a pulse under a blanket. Something was beating somewhere close. All I had to do was find it. On the ride over, Joshua asked if the cake had been heavy to carry. "It's fine, honey." I forced a smile and said it was fine. But my mind kept circling back to the cashier's whisper and the sight of William's gleaming SUV. My son drove us toward Rachel's neighborhood, humming faintly, unaware that his wife's family had just been painted in a very different light. I kept glancing at him, at the premature lines beginning to form around his eyes. At 32, he should still have the smooth face of youth, but stress had already begun its work. I wondered how many hours of overtime he had worked this month to cover another one of their emergencies. "You okay? Mom, you seem quiet." Joshua's eyes flickered from the road to my face, concern evident in his voice. "Just tired," I answered, clutching the cake box on my lap. The medication makes me a little fuzzy sometimes. Another lie to protect him. But was I really protecting Joshua, or just postponing an uncomfortable truth? The first photograph I have of Joshua shows a tiny boy with his father's dark eyes, staring up at the camera with a serious expression no 3-year-old should wear. Robert had just been diagnosed with cancer then, and even though Joshua couldn't understand what was happening, he somehow sensed the gravity in our home. After Robert died, it was just the two of us in a 1-bedroom apartment with walls so thin I could hear the neighbors arguing about cereal. I took extra shifts at the clinic, wore the same 3 outfits on rotation, and made sure Joshua never felt the pinch of our circumstances. He had good clothes, participated in school activities, and went to college on a combination of scholarships and my carefully guarded savings. I still remember the day he graduated from Ohio State with his engineering degree. Pride had bloomed in my chest like a physical thing, warming me from the inside out. All those years of sacrifice had been worth it to see him in that cap and gown. Future bright as new pennies. Joshua found a good job at a tech company in Columbus, bought a small house with a yard, and seemed content. Then he met Rachel at a company event. She was beautiful in that polished way that speaks of expensive creams and regular salon visits. Her laugh was like wind chimes, delicate and practiced. When Joshua introduced us, her handshake was perfect. Not too firm, not too limp, but her eyes never quite warmed when she smiled at me. "Your son is wonderful, Mrs. Miller," she'd said. Her arm linked through Joshua's. "He talks about you constantly." I tried to like her. I really did. But something about Rachel felt rehearsed, as if she'd studied for the role of loving girlfriend and performed it flawlessly. Still, Joshua was happier than I'd ever seen him. His face lit from within when she entered a room. The engagement came quickly, too quickly, perhaps. But who was I to judge love sometimes moves at its own pace? The wedding was small but elegant, with touches that suggested money I knew my son didn't have. When I asked about the costs, Joshua brushed it off. "Rachel's parents wanted to contribute," he explained. "They're excited to welcome me to the family." I met William and Patricia Thompson properly at the rehearsal dinner. William had the confident handshake of a man accustomed to being listened to, while Patricia's jewelry clinked softly as she air-kissed my cheek. They were charming, attentive, and spoke about how Joshua was the son they'd never had. "We just have our Rachel," Patricia explained, patting my hand. Having Joshua in our lives is such a blessing. It wasn't until after the honeymoon that the first request came. Rachel called Joshua during dinner at my apartment, her voice tearful over the speaker. Her father had lost his job. She claimed they needed help with the mortgage payment, just until he found something new. Joshua didn't hesitate. "Of course we'll help," he said, already reaching for his checkbook. "Family takes care of family." I said nothing, though questions bubbled in my throat. Hadn't William mentioned his executive position just weeks earlier? Didn't their house in Dublin, the affluent suburb of Columbus, suggest financial stability? But I swallowed my concerns. This was Joshua's new family, and I didn't want to start trouble. The requests continued, each one wrapped in crisis and urgency. Patricia needed expensive medication insurance wouldn't cover. Their car broke down. The roof leaked during a storm. Each time, Joshua wrote checks or made transfers without question. "They'd do the same for us," he assured me when I finally voiced mild concern. "That's what family does." I noticed the circles darkening under his eyes, the way his phone always seemed to ring during our rare dinners together, how he checked his bank account with increasing frequency, his mouth tightening at the corners. My son, who had once planned trips and bought concert tickets, now calculated costs for basic necessities. When I suggested he and Rachel visit me for dinner to save money, he looked embarrassed. "Rachel prefers to eat out," he admitted. "Says she works too hard to spend her evenings in someone else's kitchen." The comment stung, but I nodded and changed the subject. I had spent a lifetime putting Joshua's happiness first. I wasn't about to stop now. Then came the afternoon that Rachel called me in tears, saying William's heart medication cost too much. I had pulled $60 from my grocery envelope and dropped it in their mailbox that night. The next morning, while waiting for the bus, I saw William drive past in a crisp suit and polished shoes that looked nothing like the image of a man weighed down by illness. I told myself maybe it was borrowed or a gift. I did not want to think badly of family. Another time, Rachel stopped by my apartment and casually mentioned a dinner she and Joshua had attended at a steakhouse in downtown Columbus, the kind where one plate costs more than my entire week of groceries. When I asked if it was for a birthday or a work event, she shrugged and said friends had invited them and insisted on paying. Later, scrolling through photos on my phone, I stumbled on her social media post from the same evening. She had written, "Treating Dad the way he deserves," with a photo of William holding up a glass of wine. My heart had pinched at the sight, but I told myself it must have been an old picture. Now, crouched behind dumpsters, replaying the cashier's words, those small contradictions stacked up like bricks in a wall. How many times had I ignored the details because I wanted harmony for my son's marriage, the new curtains in their living room, the watch on William's wrist, the string of pearl earrings Rachel claimed were fake. Each memory returned with sharp edges I could no longer smooth away. William finished his call, slipped the phone into his jacket, and walked back toward the store as if nothing unusual had happened. But the sight of those glossy bags disappearing into the trunk of that SUV was burned into me. The cashier had been right about at least one thing. Something about this family's story did not add up. And if I wanted to protect Joshua, I would have to keep watching, no matter how much it hurt to discover the truth. That night, as I prepared for bed in my small apartment, the phone rang. It was Joshua, his voice tight with stress. "Mom, I hate to ask, but do you have any extra cash this month? Rachel's dad needs some tests insurance won't cover, and we're a little short." My hand tightened on the receiver. Through the window, I could see the moon hanging low over Columbus, cold and distant. In that moment, I made a decision. "I need to watch my budget carefully this month, honey," I said slowly. "My prescription costs went up." A pause. "Oh, of course. Don't worry about it. I'll figure something out." The guilt in his voice made my chest ache, but I held firm. If the Thompsons were deceiving my son, I needed proof, not suspicions, and that meant watching more carefully, gathering evidence before I broke my son's heart. As I hung up, I noticed my hands were shaking. For the first time in his life, I had refused my son's request for help. It felt like a betrayal, even though my intentions were to protect him. I opened my nightstand drawer and pulled out a small notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date and what I had seen today. This would be my record, my evidence. No one could dismiss an old woman's concerns if she had documentation. Sleep came late that night, broken by dreams of Joshua as a small boy, asking for help I couldn't provide. The following Saturday, I told Joshua I wanted to visit the farmer's market on High Street. He offered to drive me, but I insisted I would take the bus. What I really wanted was space to follow my own plan. The image of William slipping into that shiny SUV had rooted itself deep in my mind. I needed more than one glimpse, more than one whispered warning. I needed to see for myself the rhythm of his life when he thought no one was watching. From the market, I walked 3 blocks to a small cafe with wide windows and a clear view of the road. I ordered black coffee and waited. At noon sharp, William's SUV rolled past. He did not turn toward the hardware store he claimed to be working at part-time. Instead, he pulled into the lot of the Dublin Country Club, a place so exclusive I had only ever seen it in magazine articles at the dentist's office. The guard at the gate waved him through without hesitation. My chest tightened. People drowning in debt do not stroll into country clubs in tailored jackets. I lingered until he drove away 2 hours later, looking satisfied, his posture straight, his face glowing the way people look after closing a deal. He had no grocery bags this time, just a leather briefcase when he passed me on the street corner. I ducked behind a bus shelter, heart pounding. He was humming, as if the world itself had no weight for him at all. That evening, as I walked home, the October air sharp in my lungs, I overheard 2 women outside a boutique on 3rd Avenue. One, a gray-haired woman in a bright red scarf, said, "Did you see Rachel last week at the mall? That emerald dress she wore must have cost at least $200. The other adjusted her glasses and replied, "And she bought those French beauty creams, too. My granddaughter works there and says Rachel is one of their best customers." I slowed my pace, ears straining. These were not women gossiping idly. Their voices carried the irritation of neighbors who had seen too much. "Heard they're asking everyone for money while living like royalty." The first woman continued, "My nephew works with Joshua Miller. Says the poor man is working himself to death for them." I hurried the last few blocks to my apartment, my pulse fast. The picture was getting clearer. The Thompsons begged Joshua for rent money, claimed unpaid bills and overdue medicine, but still they glided through boutiques, salons, and country clubs like royalty in disguise. My son's overtime hours, his exhaustion, the gray shadows under his eyes. He was paying for their theater. I pressed my hand against the cool metal railing outside my building and made a silent vow. I would no longer silence my instincts. Whatever truth was hiding in plain sight, I was going to pull it into the light, no matter how much it hurt. The next day was Sunday. Joshua usually called me after church, but this time my phone remained silent until late afternoon. When it finally rang, his voice sounded strained. "Rachel's parents are having some financial difficulties," he said without preamble. "They're behind on their mortgage payments." I clutched the phone tighter. "That's the third time this year, isn't it?" A pause. "They've had bad luck." $3,000 of bad luck last month alone, I said quietly, remembering the figures Joshua had mentioned during a moment of stress. "Mom, they're family. We help family." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "Joshua, have you verified any of these emergencies, called the mortgage company, seen the medical bills?" His breath caught. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you protect yourself. Make sure the money is going where they say it is." "Rachel would never lie to me," he said, voice hardening. "And neither would her parents." I had pushed too far, too soon, without evidence. My concerns sounded like the paranoia of a jealous mother-in-law. "I hope you're right," I said finally. "I just worry about you working so hard." "I have to go," he replied, the distance in his voice a physical pain. "Rachel's waiting for me." After he hung up, I sat staring at the phone, wondering if I had just damaged my relationship with my only child. But the image of William laughing as he loaded those shopping bags, mentioning Joshua's money so casually, would not leave me. 2 days later, I visited David Parker again at Harrison's grocery. He was stacking cans when I approached, his name tag slightly crooked on his blue vest. "Mrs. Miller," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was nearby. "I was hoping you'd come back." "Tell me what you know," I said, keeping my voice low. "About the Thompsons." David's hands stilled on the soup cans. "My cousin Nancy dated William Thompson for a while, before he married Patricia. He borrowed money from her, thousands of dollars for business opportunities that never materialized. When she asked for it back, he disappeared." "That was years ago," I pointed out. "People don't change," David countered. "Especially not con artists. I've seen them in here, buying champagne and fancy cheeses the same day my friend at the bank says they've cashed a check from your son." My stomach twisted. "You're certain?" David nodded grimly. "My friend Thomas works in the mortgage department at First Ohio Bank. The Thompsons don't have a mortgage. They paid off their house 5 years ago. Whatever money your son is sending for mortgage payments isn't going to any bank." I leaned against the shelf, feeling suddenly unsteady. "Why are you telling me this?" David's eyes softened. "My grandmother was taken advantage of by people she trusted. No one listened when she tried to warn them. By the time anyone realized, she'd lost everything." He straightened his name tag. "I can't stand by and watch it happen to someone else." I thanked him, bought a few items I didn't need to justify my presence, and left with my mind racing. No mortgage payments, no financial difficulties, just lies, carefully constructed to extract money from my trusting son. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my small apartment, the notebook in my hand growing heavier with each entry. David's information, the country club visit, the shopping bags, the overheard conversation, all pointing to a systematic deception. My phone rang just after 11 p.m., Joshua's voice was tight with panic. "Mom, I'm so sorry to call this late. Rachel's dad is in the hospital. They think it might be his heart. We need to pay a deposit before they'll do the tests. I've maxed out my credit card with the last emergency. And Rachel's crying. I hate to ask, but do you have anything saved? Even a few hundred would help." My throat closed. I knew, with a certainty that felt like lead in my stomach, that this was another fabrication. But how could I prove it? "Which hospital?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Riverside," Joshua replied, sounding relieved that I wasn't refusing immediately. "Rachel's with him now." "I'll meet you there," I said, already reaching for my coat. "Don't worry about the money yet. Let's make sure William is getting the care he needs. You don't have to come out this late." "I want to." I cut him off gently. Family supports each other in person, not just financially. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "I'll tell Rachel you're coming." I took a taxi I couldn't afford to Riverside Methodist Hospital, my heart hammering against my ribs. If William was truly ill, I would help without hesitation. But if this was another lie... The emergency room was busy even at that late hour. Nurses hurried past, their soft-soled shoes squeaking on the polished floor. The smell of antiseptic brought back memories of my nursing days, the controlled chaos of healthcare. Joshua was waiting near the entrance, his face pale with worry. "Mom, thank you for coming." Rachel's inside with her dad. "Has the doctor said anything?" I asked, squeezing his arm. "Not yet. They're running tests. Rachel says he collapsed at home." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Let's go see them." We made our way through sliding doors into the main emergency department. Joshua led me toward a curtained area, but before we reached it, I caught sight of Patricia Thompson at the vending machine, calmly selecting a candy bar. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup fresh. She showed no signs of a woman whose husband might be facing a cardiac emergency. When she saw us, surprise flickered across her face before she composed herself. "Susan," she said, her voice carefully modulated to suggest distress. "You didn't have to come all this way." "Of course I did," I replied, watching her closely. "How is William?" "The doctors are with him now," she said, glancing toward the curtained area. "It's been so frightening." I nodded sympathetically, though doubt crawled through my mind. "Which doctor is attending?" I used to work with several cardiologists here. Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "I don't recall his name. It's been such a blur." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Joshua mentioned something about a deposit for tests." "Yes." Patricia's hand fluttered to her throat, where a gold necklace gleamed. "The insurance is giving us trouble. They want $500 before they'll do the cardiac catheterization." 25 years as a nurse had taught me many things, including hospital billing procedures. No emergency cardiac care would be delayed for a deposit, especially not at Riverside. Insurance verification happened simultaneously with treatment in true emergencies. "Let me speak with the billing department," I offered. "I still know some people here. Maybe I can help sort it out." Alarm flashed in Patricia's eyes. "That's not necessary. Rachel is handling it." "It's no trouble," I insisted, turning to Joshua. "Why don't you stay with Patricia while I find Rachel?" Before either could object, I walked purposefully toward the nurse's station. The young woman behind the counter looked up as I approached. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice professional. "I'm looking for information on a patient. William Thompson. His daughter said he was admitted for cardiac issues." The nurse typed on her computer, then frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, we don't have a William Thompson registered tonight." My suspicion crystallized into certainty. "Are you sure his wife and daughter are here? They said he was having cardiac tests." She checked again. "No one by that name has been admitted through the ER in the last 24 hours. Perhaps they're at another hospital." I thanked her and turned back, a cold clarity settling over me. There was no emergency, no heart attack, no medical bills, just another elaborate lie to extract money from my son. As I approached the waiting area, I saw Rachel had joined Joshua and Patricia. Her eyes were red-rimmed. tears smudging her mascara in a way that looked almost calculated. When she saw me, she rushed forward. "Susan, thank you for coming. Dad's resting now. They're moving him to a room upstairs." I met her gaze steadily. "That's interesting. Rachel?" Because according to the hospital records, William Thompson was never admitted tonight. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. Rachel's face froze, her eyes darting to her mother, then to Joshua. "There must be some mistake," she began, her voice higher than usual. "We've been here for hours." "No," I interrupted gently. "I don't think there's been a mistake. I think you're lying to my son. Again." Joshua stepped forward, confusion and anger warring on his face. "Mom, what are you saying?" I turned to him, my heart breaking for the pain I was about to cause. "There's no emergency. Joshua, your father-in-law isn't here. This is just another way to get money from you." "That's ridiculous," Patricia snapped, but her hand trembled as she clutched her purse. "Is it?" I countered. "Then where is William? Which room is he in? Which doctor is treating him? Because the hospital has no record of him being admitted tonight." Joshua looked between us, his face paling further. "Rachel, what's going on?" Rachel's composure cracked slightly. "The hospital must have made a mistake with the paperwork. Dad is here." "I swear." "Then take us to him," I challenged softly. Rachel's eyes filled with fresh tears. They just took him for tests. We can't disturb him right now." Joshua's expression was changing, doubt creeping in where blind trust had been. "Rachel, just tell me the truth. Is your dad really here?" The moment stretched, taut with tension. Then, from behind us, a familiar voice called out, "Patricia, sorry I'm late. The meeting ran long." We all turned to see William Thompson striding toward us, briefcase in hand, looking the picture of health in an expensive suit. No hospital gown, no medical equipment, no sign of a man who had suffered a cardiac event. He stopped short when he saw us all staring, his eyes widening as he realized his mistake. In that moment, the elaborate house of lies the Thompsons had built began to crumble, and my son's world collapsed with it. I'll continue with part 2 of your story, aiming for approximately 6,000 words as requested. This section will focus on the search for truth and the gathering of evidence. The drive home from Riverside Hospital that night was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Joshua gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His jaw clenched against words that threatened to spill out. We had left the Thompsons in the parking lot, Rachel's tearful explanations falling on increasingly deaf ears. "It was just a misunderstanding," she had pleaded, clutching at Joshua's arm as he backed away from her. "Daddy was supposed to be at the hospital. He's been having chest pains." We were worried, but William's healthy appearance and surprised expression had told a different story. When Joshua quietly asked if they had planned to use the hospital deposit money for something else, Rachel's stammered denial only confirmed our suspicions. Now, as streetlights swept across his face in rhythmic patterns, I could see my son's world realigning itself around this new reality. "I should have known," he finally said, his voice hollow. "There were signs." I reached across the console and placed my hand on his arm. "People who love you can be blind to deception. Joshua, that's not your fault." 3 years, he whispered. 3 years of emergencies and bills and sudden expenses. How much have I given them? Manum 20,030. I stopped keeping track because I thought I was helping family. The pain in his voice was unbearable. I had protected him from so much as a child bullies, disappointment, the harsh realities of our financial situation. But I couldn't protect him from this betrayal by the woman he had chosen to share his life with. "What do I do now?" he asked as we pulled up to my apartment building. "You get some sleep," I said firmly. "And tomorrow, we start gathering evidence. If they've been systematically taking advantage of you, we need to understand the full picture before you confront them." He nodded slowly, the analytical engineer in him responding to the logical approach. "You're right. I need data, not just suspicion. Will you be okay tonight? You can stay here if you want." I gestured toward my small apartment. Joshua shook his head. "I told Rachel I needed space to think. I'm going to stay at Mike's place for a few days. Mike was his college roommate, still his closest friend. "Call me tomorrow," I said, squeezing his hand before climbing out of the car. I watched him drive away, my heart heavy with a mother's special pain knowing your child is hurting and being unable to fix it. The next morning, I called Sarah Jenkins, a retired bank manager who lived in my building. We had become friends through the community garden program, spending Sunday afternoons tending tomatoes and trading stories about our grandchildren. Sarah was sharp, discreet, and still had connections at First Ohio Bank. "Sarah, I need your help," I said when she answered. "It's about Joshua." An hour later, we sat at her kitchen table, mugs of coffee steaming between us as I explained the situation. Sarah's expression grew increasingly troubled as I described the Thompsons' pattern of financial emergencies and last night's hospital charade. "Con artists," she said flatly when I finished. "And they're using your son as their personal ATM. "I need to prove it," I replied. "Not just catch them in one lie, but show the systematic nature of what they've been doing." Sarah tapped her fingers thoughtfully against her mug. "I still have friends at the bank. I can't access accounts. Of course, that would be illegal, but I can ask some general questions about mortgage fraud patterns. Maybe get some insight into how we might track their activities." "Thank you," I said, relieved to have an ally with financial expertise. "In the meantime," Sarah continued, "you should try to connect with this cashier again, David. He seems to have information about the Thompsons' spending habits that could be valuable." I nodded, already planning my next visit to Harrison's grocery. I also need to find a way to document their lifestyle, the trips, the shopping, the country club membership. Joshua needs to see the disconnect between their claimed financial struggles and their actual spending. "Be careful, Susan," Sarah warned. "People who lie this elaborately can become dangerous when cornered." Her words sent a chill through me, but I squared my shoulders. I faced worse to protect my son. That afternoon, I returned to Harrison's grocery. David was working the register again, his expression brightening slightly when he saw me approach with a small basket of items. "Mrs. Miller," he greeted me quietly. "I've been thinking about you and your son." "I need your help, David," I said, keeping my voice low as he scanned my purchases. "Last night proved you were right about the Thompsons." Briefly, I described the hospital incident. David's face darkened as he listened. "I'm not surprised," he said, bagging my groceries. "My shift ends in 20 minutes. Can you wait? There's more I think you should know." I nodded and paid for my items, then browsed the store until I saw David emerge from the back room in street clothes. He gestured toward the small coffee shop attached to the grocery store, and I followed him to a corner table away from other customers. "My cousin Nancy wasn't William's only victim," David began without preamble, his voice tight with restrained anger. "After she told me about him, I started asking around. He has a pattern, charm, requests for temporary help, emergencies that only money can solve. He's done it to at least 3 other people I know of." "Did anyone report him to the police?" I asked. David shook his head. "The amounts were always just small enough that it wasn't worth pursuing legally. And he's careful to make everything seem like loans between friends or family, not explicit fraud. But with Joshua, it's been going on for years," I said. "The total amount must be substantial." "That's different," David agreed. "Especially if you can prove a pattern of deliberate deception." "I need evidence," I stressed. "Not just my word against theirs." David hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "I've been keeping track of their purchases here. Dates, amounts, types of items, mostly luxury foods, expensive wines, all while they were supposedly struggling to pay bills." He showed me a spreadsheet with meticulously documented transactions. "Why would you do this?" I asked, surprised by his thoroughness. His expression hardened. "My grandmother lost her house and savings to people like the Thompsons. By the time anyone believed her, it was too late." He paused. "I can also get you copies of their receipts from our system. It's not strictly by the book, but it would help establish the pattern," I finished for him. David nodded. "Give me your number. I'll text you when I have everything compiled." As I wrote my number on a napkin, David added, "There's something else. Thomas, my friend at the bank." He mentioned the Thompsons recently applied for a home equity loan, If they've paid off their mortgage as he claims, they're trying to extract cash from their house. That might be worth looking into. The information settled like a stone in my stomach. Were they planning something bigger, preparing to leave town with a final substantial payout? I thanked David and left with a renewed sense of urgency. On the bus ride home, I called Joshua. "I've been doing some research," he said before I could share my findings. "Going through our bank statements. Mom, I've given them over $25,000 in the past 2 years alone." The amount made me gasp. For what? Exactly mortgage help, medical bills, car repairs, property taxes. His voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm creating a spreadsheet of every transfer and check, matching them to the supposed emergencies." My practical, methodical son was channeling his pain into organization. It was how he had always dealt with problems: break them down, analyze the components, find a solution. "That's good," I encouraged him. "I'm gathering evidence too. We need to understand the full scope of what they've done." "Rachel keeps calling," he said, his voice finally cracking. "Says it's all a misunderstanding, that her parents sometimes exaggerate their needs, but they really do need help." "What do you think?" I asked carefully. A long pause. "I think I've been a fool," he finally answered. "But I need to be sure. I need to see everything clearly before I decide what to do next. We'll get there," I promised. Together. Over the next 3 days, Joshua and I operated like detectives, gathering information from various sources. Sarah connected us with a mortgage specialist who confirmed, without accessing specific account details, that the Thompsons' address had no active mortgage recorded in the county property database. Their home had been fully paid off nearly 5 years ago, well before they began asking Joshua for mortgage assistance. David sent me copies of grocery receipts showing champagne purchases and gourmet food items dated the same days Rachel had tearfully called Joshua about overdue utility bills. The pattern was undeniable, but the most damning evidence came from Barbara Delaney, a neighbor of the Thompsons whom Sarah knew through her church group. When I called her, introducing myself as Joshua's mother, she immediately became guarded. "I don't want to get involved in family matters," she said hesitantly. "I understand," I assured her. "But my son has been sending the Thompsons money for supposed financial emergencies. If they're misrepresenting their situation, he deserves to know." Barbara was silent for a moment. "Then William and Patricia have lived in Dublin for 8 years. In that time, I've never seen any sign of financial hardship. Quite the opposite." "What do you mean?" I prompted. "They renovated their kitchen last year, top of the line everything. They take 2 or 3 vacations annually. Caribbean cruises, European tours. William plays golf at Dublin Country Club every week, and Patricia is always showing off new jewelry at neighborhood gatherings." Each detail was another nail in the coffin of the Thompsons' deception. "And last month," Barbara continued, warming to her subject, "they threw an engagement party for Rachel's cousin. Catered affair, live band, open bar with premium liquor. Must have cost thousands." I remembered Joshua mentioning he had sent them $1,200 that same week for emergency plumbing repairs. "Would you be willing to write down what you've observed?" I asked. Just a simple statement about their lifestyle and apparent financial situation. Barbara hesitated. "The Thompsons can be vindictive when crossed. Patricia has significant influence in our neighborhood association. I understand your concern," I said. "But this is about protecting my son from further exploitation." There was a long pause before Barbara sighed. "I'll email you something, not because I want to cause trouble, but because what they're doing isn't right. My own son was taken advantage of by a girlfriend years ago. I wish someone had helped him see the truth sooner." By the end of the week, we had accumulated a substantial file of evidence bank transfers, with dates matching luxury purchases, property records disproving mortgage claims, witness statements about the Thompsons' spending habits, and even photographs from Rachel's own social media showing expensive restaurant meals and new designer items during periods when Joshua was working overtime to cover their emergencies. The picture it painted was unambiguous. This wasn't occasional exaggeration or poor financial management. It was systematic deception designed to extract as much money as possible from my trusting son. I met Joshua at his friend Mike's apartment on Friday evening to review everything we had gathered. He looked tired but resolute as we spread the documents across Mike's dining table. "It's all here," he said quietly, tapping the folder containing David's receipts. 3 years of lies. "What will you do?" I asked, watching his face carefully. Joshua rubbed his temples. "I need to confront Rachel. Get her to admit what they've been doing. Then," he trailed off, the enormity of dismantling his marriage hanging unspoken between us. "Do you want me to come with you?" I offered. He shook his head. "This is something I need to do myself. But first, there's one more piece of information I want to check." Joshua opened his laptop and navigated to their joint bank account. "Rachel doesn't know I can see the transfers from her personal account. I've noticed regular deposits from her parents over the past few months. Small amounts, but consistent." He pulled up the transaction history, pointing to a pattern of 200-300 deposits from William Thompson to Rachel's personal account, usually within days of Joshua sending money for their various emergencies. "They've been giving her kickbacks," he said, his voice hardening. "A percentage of what they get from me." The betrayal cut even deeper than I had imagined. Not just opportunistic lies about family emergencies, but a coordinated ongoing scheme with Rachel as an active participant. "I'm so sorry, Joshua," I say as he said. Reaching for his hand, he squeezed my fingers, then straightened his shoulders. "I'm meeting Rachel tomorrow. She thinks we're going to talk about reconciliation. Instead, I'm going to show her all of this and demand the truth." As I left Mike's apartment that night, worry gnawed at my stomach. The Thompsons had built an elaborate system of deception. People like that rarely surrender their advantage without a fight. "Be careful," I told Joshua at the door. "Don't meet her alone. Mike will be in the next room," he assured me. "And we're meeting at a public cafe. It'll be fine." "Mom," I nodded, but the unease persisted. Something told me the Thompsons wouldn't give up their golden goose without one final play. The invitation came 2 weeks later. Joshua had confronted Rachel with our evidence, resulting in a tearful confession that was more self-justification than remorse. She claimed her parents had pressured her, that she'd felt trapped between loyalty to them and love for Joshua. He wasn't convinced, especially after discovering the kickbacks to her personal account. They were separated now, living apart while Joshua consulted with a divorce attorney. The Thompsons had been suspiciously quiet since the confrontation, which only increased my concern. Then came the phone call. Clara Thompson, Rachel's mother, called me directly on a Thursday evening, her voice sugary over the line. "Susan, we feel terrible about this misunderstanding with Joshua. William and I would like to invite you over for Sunday lunch. Nothing fancy, just a family meal to clear the air." My instinct was to refuse, but curiosity won out. What game were they playing now? "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Patricia," I replied cautiously. "Please," she insisted. "We owe you an explanation, and we want to make things right. Rachel won't be there. It's just us and you. An opportunity for honest conversation." After consulting with Joshua, who warned me to be careful, but agreed it might provide closure, I accepted the invitation. On Sunday, I took a taxi out of Columbus to the Thompsons' neighborhood in Dublin. The lawns were manicured, leaves raked into perfect piles, porches swept clean. Hardly the setting for people who struggled to pay bills. The Thompson house was a large colonial with pristine white columns and dark green shutters. As the taxi pulled away, I stood for a moment taking in the obvious signs of prosperity: the landscaped garden, the stone pathway, the expensive cars in the driveway. Patricia greeted me at the door in a silk blouse the color of autumn leaves. She hugged me warmly, and the faint trace of expensive perfume clung to my coat. I had seen that bottle once in a store window. Its price was nearly half my grocery budget for a month. "Susan, thank you for coming," she said, ushering me inside. "William is in the den finishing up a call. He'll join us shortly." Inside, the house gleamed as though it had been staged for a magazine. The living room walls had fresh paint, the floors shone, and a brand new leather sofa sat where an old fabric one had been when I last visited. Crystal vases dotted the tables, filled with roses that looked too perfect to be store-bought. A massive flat-screen television dominated one wall, the kind I had only ever seen in appliance showrooms. I forced my lips into a polite smile, but inside, Every detail screamed contradiction. This was not the home of a family in financial distress. "Can I get you something to drink?" Patricia offered, leading me toward the kitchen. "Coffee wine." "Coffee would be lovely," I replied, taking the opportunity to observe more of the house. The kitchen had been renovated since my last visit, now featuring gleaming stainless steel appliances and granite countertops. A professional espresso machine that must have cost thousands sat on the counter next to a wine refrigerator. "You've made some changes," I commented, gesturing around the space. Patricia's smile faltered momentarily. "Just a few updates, nothing major." As she prepared coffee with practiced movements, I noticed her diamond bracelet catching the light. Not costume jewelry, but the real thing, at least 2 carats worth of stones. William entered the kitchen just as Patricia was setting cups on the table. He wore a cashmere sweater and pressed slacks, looking more like a retired executive than someone struggling to pay medical bills. "Susan," he greeted me with a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming. I know things have been difficult lately." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "It seemed important to you both." We settled at the dining table, where Patricia had arranged a charcuterie board with imported cheeses and cured meats. William poured wine from a dark bottle with a gold-foiled label. I recognized it instantly just last week. I had seen the same bottle at a specialty store. $60 at least. "A gift from a friend," William said when he noticed me examining the label. His smile was smooth, practiced. Patricia carried in platters of roasted lamb, saffron rice, and imported cheeses, all arranged like a feast from another world. "We found some incredible discounts," she explained when I raised an eyebrow. Discounts again. Always discounts. As the meal stretched on, I kept my hands folded in my lap, studying every detail. Patricia's earrings caught the light pearls. Not fake like Rachel had once claimed to Joshua. Her nails were manicured in a style that cost more than my weekly prescriptions. The conversation danced lightly around Joshua, his job, and the misunderstanding that had led to his separation from Rachel. Each time they mentioned the money Joshua had sent, William and Patricia exchanged a glance so quick most would have missed it. But I always saw. "Susan," William said finally, setting down his fork. "I want to be honest with you about our situation." I waited, curious to hear what explanation they had prepared. "We did exaggerate some of our financial difficulties," he admitted, his tone suggesting this was a minor transgression. "But we truly did need help occasionally. We've had medical expenses. Home repairs, life is expensive these days. So expensive that you needed $25,000 from my son while renovating your kitchen and taking Caribbean cruises," I asked mildly. William's smile tightened. "Our finances are complex. Investments. Assets that can't be easily liquidated. Sometimes cash flow is a problem even when overall we're stable." "And the mortgage payments Joshua sent for a house that's fully paid off," I pressed. Patricia interjected smoothly. "We refinanced recently. The paperwork probably hasn't updated in the public records yet." Lie after lie. Even now, they couldn't help themselves. "And Rachel's involvement," I asked, "the kickbacks to her personal account." William's composure finally cracked slightly. "I don't know what you think you've discovered, Susan, but you're misinterpreting normal family financial support. We sometimes give Rachel money. Yes, what parents don't help their children. I decided to try a different approach." "Why did you invite me here today?" William surely not just to serve me excellent wine and deny what we both know is true. William and Patricia exchanged another glance. Then William leaned forward, his demeanor shifting to something more businesslike. "We want to put this unpleasantness behind us," he said. "Rachel loves Joshua. They can work through this misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding," I repeated. "Is that what you call systematic deception?" "We call it a family helping each other," Patricia said sharply. "Perhaps not always in the most transparent way, but with good intentions." I almost laughed at the audacity. Good intentions don't typically involve lying about medical emergencies or mortgage payments. William's expression hardened. "What exactly do you want?" "Susan money back. An apology. What will it take for you to encourage Joshua to reconsider this divorce?" And there it was, the real purpose of this lunch. They weren't seeking reconciliation or offering explanations. They were trying to protect their income source. Joshua makes his own decisions, I said calmly. He always has. But he listens to you, Patricia insisted. You have influence. If you told him that we acknowledge our mistakes, that we're committed to more honesty going forward. You want me to help you continue exploiting my son? I interrupted, no longer bothering with politeness. To convince him that your theft and manipulation were just mistakes that deserve forgiveness. William's eyes narrowed. Be careful with accusations like theft. Susan, that's a serious legal claim without proof. We have proof, I replied evenly. Bank records, receipts, witness statements, enough to establish a clear pattern of deliberate deception. A tense silence fell over the table. Patricia's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass. What if we made restitution? William finally asked, his tone calculating. A payment plan to return what Joshua sent us. Would that satisfy you? I stood up slowly, placing my napkin beside my barely touched plate. This was never about money, William. It's about the betrayal of my son's trust. About 3 years of lies from people who claim to love him. No payment plan erases that. As I moved to leave, William's demeanor changed again, a flash of anger breaking through his controlled facade. You're making a mistake, Susan. We can make things very difficult for Joshua if this continues. The threat hung in the air between us. I paused at the dining room doorway and turned back to them. Are you threatening my son? I asked quietly. William smiled thinly. Just pointing out that divorce can be messy. Accusations can go both ways. Rachel has her own version of events that might not paint Joshua in the most flattering light. My blood ran cold at the implication. They were planning to smear Joshua's reputation if he proceeded with the divorce. You've taken enough from him, I said, my voice steady despite my anger. If you try to take his reputation too, you'll find I'm not as easy to manipulate as you thought. Patricia rose, abandoning the pretense of hospitality. This is between Rachel and Joshua. You should stay out of it. You made it my business when you started lying to extract money from my son, I replied. And unlike Joshua, I've never been blinded by affection for any of you. I see exactly who you are. William stood as well, his height meant to intimidate as he stepped closer. And what exactly do you think you can do about it? Susan, you're a retired nurse living on Social Security. We have resources, connections. I held his gaze without flinching. I raised my son alone after his father died when he was 7. I worked double shifts while getting my nursing degree. I faced worse than a family of con artists who prey on kind people. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered in William's eyes. Then his expression hardened again. Show yourself out, he said coldly, and tell Joshua to have his lawyer contact ours. We won't be discussing this further with either of you directly. I left their beautiful house with its perfect lawn and gleaming windows, more convinced than ever that the Thompsons weren't just opportunists. They were calculating predators who had selected Joshua precisely because of his generous nature and financial stability. Halfway down their street, I noticed my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a deep, simmering anger I rarely allowed myself to feel. They had taken advantage of my son's kindness, drained his savings, and now planned to attack his character if he sought justice. As I waited for my taxi at the corner, a neighbor watering plants in her front yard caught my eye. She looked familiar, a woman about my age with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. With a start, I realized she was one of the women I had overheard outside the boutique weeks ago, discussing Rachel's shopping habits. On impulse, I walked over to her garden gate. "Excuse me," I said. "You don't know me, but I'm Susan Miller, Joshua's mother." The woman's eyes widened in recognition. "Barbara Delaney," she said, extending her hand. "I've heard about you from Patricia." Her tone suggested what she'd heard hadn't been flattering. "I imagine you have," I replied with a small smile. "May I ask you something? Barbara, how long have you lived next to the Thompsons?" Barbara glanced toward their house, then back at me. "Nearly 8 years, since they moved to the neighborhood. And in that time, have they ever seemed to be in financial difficulty, struggling with bills or medical expenses?" She laughed, the sound short and disbelieving. The Thompsons, they're the last people I'd describe as struggling. William brags about his investment portfolio at every neighborhood barbecue. Patricia shows off a new piece of jewelry practically every month. Yet they've been telling my son they can't pay their mortgage or medical bills, I said quietly. They've taken thousands from him for fabricated emergencies. Barbara's expression shifted from surprise to understanding. That explains a lot, she murmured. I've overheard things. Conversations on their deck about another transfer from Joshua, followed by laughter. My stomach twisted at the image of the Thompsons laughing about their successful manipulations of my son. Would you be willing to tell Joshua what you've observed? I asked. It might help him fully understand what he's been dealing with. Barbara hesitated, glancing again toward the Thompson house. William has significant influence in our homeowners association, she said cautiously. He can make things difficult. I understand, I assured her. But my son is trying to extricate himself from 3 years of deception. Anything that helps him see the situation clearly would be invaluable. She seemed to come to a decision, straightening her shoulders. My nephew was scammed by someone he trusted last year. No one believed him at first, and it nearly destroyed him. She nodded firmly. I'll help. The Thompsons have bullied enough people in this neighborhood with their money and connections. It's time someone stood up to them. I thanked her and exchanged contact information just as my taxi arrived. As we pulled away from the curb, I saw William watching from his front window, his expression dark. The confrontation at the Thompson house had confirmed my worst suspicions. They weren't simply opportunistic or careless with money. They were deliberate con artists who had targeted my son and now planned to punish him for discovering their scheme. The question now was how to protect Joshua, not just from further financial exploitation, but from the character assassination the Thompsons were clearly planning. When I returned to my apartment, I found Joshua waiting outside my door, his expression troubled. "Mom," he said as soon as he saw me, "I found something else. Something worse than we thought." He followed me inside, pulling out his laptop as soon as we sat down. "I've been going through old emails, looking for documentation of their requests for money. I found these." He opened a folder containing dozens of emails from Rachel to her parents. They had been in his deleted items folder. Apparently Rachel had used his laptop and forgotten to permanently delete her correspondence. The emails detailed their scheme in black and white, plans for manufactured emergencies, discussions about how much to ask for without raising suspicion, calculations of how much they had extracted and how much more they could get. In one particularly damning message, Rachel had written, "Joshua got his annual bonus, $5,000 this time. I told him Dad's car broke down again. He didn't even question it. Should be able to transfer the money tomorrow." The usual split. The usual split appeared to be 60% to her parents, 40% to Rachel herself. But the most disturbing email was recent, dated just after Joshua had confronted Rachel with our evidence. "He knows everything, claims to have proof. We need to move to Plan B. Dad can file the lawsuit against his company next week. We have enough inside information from what he's told me. Once that's in motion, he'll have to settle with us to make it go away. One big payout instead of the monthly transfers. Might be better this way." I stared at the screen in horror. They're planning to sue Joshua's company using information he shared with Rachel in confidence. Joshua nodded grimly. Rachel has been gathering information for months. Potential security vulnerabilities, internal policies, client lists. If they file this lawsuit, even a frivolous one, it could destroy my career. The Thompsons hadn't just been stealing Joshua's money. They had been positioning themselves for a much bigger con, using Rachel to gather intelligence for a corporate lawsuit that would either result in a settlement or devastate my son professionally. This was no longer about recovering stolen funds or even achieving emotional closure. This was about protecting Joshua's future from people who would stop at nothing to exploit him. "We need to move quickly," I said, a plan already forming in my mind. "They've shown they're willing to escalate. We need to be one step ahead." As the evening light faded outside my window, Joshua and I formulated our strategy. We would not be victims again. We would not allow these predators another victory. The Thompsons had underestimated us for the last time. I'll continue with part 3 of your story, aiming for approximately 6,000 words as requested. This final section will focus on the confrontation and resolution. Monday morning dawned with a crystalline clarity that matched my resolve. After discovering the Thompsons' plan to sue Joshua's company using confidential information, we had spent Sunday night developing our counter-strategy. Joshua had contacted his company's legal department first thing that morning, alerting them to the potential threat and securing their support. Now I sat in my small kitchen, waiting for the call that would tell me whether the first phase of our plan had succeeded. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each sound a reminder that we were racing against William Thompson's machinations. My phone rang at precisely 10:15 a.m. It was Sarah Jenkins. "I spoke with my contact at First Ohio Bank," she said without preamble. "They've flagged the Thompsons' accounts for suspicious activity based on the documentation we provided. The home equity loan they applied for last week is on hold pending review." Relief washed through me. The Thompsons had been counting on that loan up to 70% of their home's value to finance their lawsuit against Joshua's company and possibly to leave town afterward. Without it, they would be scrambling. "Thank you, Sarah," I said fervently. "Did your contact mention how William reacted?" Sarah's chuckle was grim. "Apparently, he stormed into the bank this morning, demanding to know why the loan was delayed. When the manager explained they were conducting a standard review, he became belligerent. Security had to escort him out." I could picture William's face, flushed with thwarted entitlement. For perhaps the first time in years, his plans were being disrupted by forces beyond his control. "The bank can't hold off indefinitely without formal charges," Sarah cautioned. "But this gives you time to implement the rest of your strategy." After ending the call with Sarah, I checked in with David Parker, who had agreed to help us gather statements from other victims of the Thompsons' manipulation. "Nancy's willing to go on record about the money William borrowed and never repaid," he confirmed. "And I found 2 others who experienced similar scenarios. All 3 are preparing written statements for your attorney." By noon, I had a text from Barbara Delaney. "The Neighborhood Association Board has received documentation about the Thompsons' threatening behavior. Special meeting called for Friday." Each piece was falling into place. We weren't just defending against the Thompsons' lawsuit threat. We were systematically dismantling the infrastructure of respectability and financial stability they had built. Joshua called around 2 p.m., his voice tense but controlled. "Mom, Rachel just tried to access our joint savings account. The bank flagged it and called me since I'd placed a hold." "How much was she trying to withdraw?" I asked. "All of it. $15,000. The number hung in the air between us. She told the bank manager it was for a medical emergency, her father's heart condition. The same lie they had attempted at the hospital, now deployed at the bank. Their desperation was growing. "What did you tell the bank?" I asked. "I authorized a withdrawal of $500, Joshua replied. "Enough that she wouldn't immediately panic, but not enough to fund their plans. The bank manager agreed to notify me of any further attempts." "Good thinking," I said. "Have you heard from your company's legal team?" "Yes. They're preparing cease and desist letters regarding any confidential information Rachel might have gathered. They'll be delivered this afternoon." I nodded to myself, checking another item off our mental list. "And you've secured the evidence, the emails, the financial records. Everything's backed up in 3 different places," Joshua confirmed. "And I've scheduled the meeting with the district attorney's office for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Will you come with me?" "Of course," I promised. "I'll bring all the documentation we've gathered." We had decided that pursuing potential criminal charges was necessary, not out of vengeance, but to create an official record of the Thompsons' activities. Even if the district attorney declined to prosecute, having the paper trail would strengthen our position in any civil proceedings. As evening approached, my phone rang again. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Miller. A woman's voice, slightly hesitant. "This is Patricia Thompson." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "Yes, Patricia. I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday," she began, her tone conciliatory. "William and I have discussed everything, and we realize we've made some serious mistakes in how we've handled family finances." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "We'd like to make amends," Patricia went on. "Pay back whatever Joshua feels we owe. We can work out a payment plan, Or maybe there's another way to resolve this without involving lawyers or other parties. The veiled reference to law enforcement confirmed they knew about our meeting with the district attorney. Someone at the bank must have tipped them off. I appreciate the offer, Patricia, I said carefully. But I think we're beyond private arrangements at this point. Please, Susan, her voice took on an edge of desperation. You don't understand what this could do to our family, to our standing in the community, William's position at the club, our social connections. We could lose everything. You should have considered that before you systematically defrauded my son, I replied, keeping my tone even. Defrauded, Patricia's voice rose. That's a harsh word for family helping each other through difficult times. Is that what you call it? Creating fictional emergencies to extract money from Joshua while kicking back a percentage to Rachel, planning a lawsuit against his company using confidential information he trusted her with. Patricia's sharp intake of breath told me we had caught them by surprise. They hadn't realized we had discovered their lawsuit plans. I don't know what Rachel has told you, she attempted. But William was simply considering a legitimate business action. We have the emails, Patricia, I interrupted quietly. All of them. The ones where you and William and Rachel discuss how much to ask for next. The ones where you plan how to use Joshua's professional information against his company. The ones where you calculate your splits of the money you've taken from him. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. What do you want? Patricia finally asked. Her voice hardened. I want what any mother wants for my son to be safe, happy, and treated with the respect he deserves. And in practical terms, the businesswoman was emerging now, calculating costs. Full restitution of all funds taken under false pretenses, signed admissions of your actions, a legally binding agreement never to use any information Rachel gathered from Joshua or his company, and your immediate withdrawal from his life. That's extreme, Patricia sputtered. No, Patricia. Extreme would be the criminal charges for fraud that the district attorney is currently reviewing. Extreme would be the civil lawsuit for the full amount plus damages that Joshua's attorney is preparing. What I'm offering is actually quite reasonable in comparison. Another long silence. Then, I need to discuss this with William. Of course, you have until noon tomorrow to decide. After that, we proceed with legal action, both criminal and civil. As I ended the call, I realized my hands were shaking not from fear, but from the pure adrenaline of direct confrontation. All my life, I had avoided conflict when possible, seeking compromise and peace. But sometimes, standing firm was the only path to justice. My phone lit up with a text from Joshua. Rachel just called. Oh, sounds panicked. Said her parents want to meet with us tomorrow morning to work something out. Should we go? I typed back. Yes, but not at their house, public place, and bring Mike as a witness. The pieces were moving now, the carefully constructed facade of the Thompson family crumbling under pressure from multiple directions. By this time tomorrow, we would know whether they would accept our terms or force us into a more public confrontation. Either way, the truth would finally emerge from the shadows of deception. The coffee shop Joshua selected for the meeting was busy enough to ensure the Thompsons wouldn't make a scene, yet quiet enough in the back corner for a private conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a table with a clear view of both entrances and the parking lot beyond. Joshua arrived moments later with Mike, his friend providing both moral support and an impartial witness to whatever transpired. Mike nodded respectfully to me as they sat down. Rachel texted that they're running a few minutes late, Joshua said, his voice tight with tension. Classic power move. I squeezed his hand. We hold all the cards now. Remember that. At exactly 10:07 a.m., the Thompsons entered the coffee shop. William led the way, his usual confident stride noticeably subdued. Patricia followed, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. Rachel came last, her eyes darting nervously around the room until they landed on Joshua. For a moment, I saw a flash of the young woman my son had fallen in love with, vulnerable, seemingly genuine. Then her gaze shifted to me, and the mask of calculation returned. William approached our table first. Joshua, Susan. His acknowledgement of our presence was curt, his eyes flicking dismissively over Mike. I wasn't aware we'd have an audience. Mike is here as a witness, Joshua replied evenly. Given recent events, I'm sure you understand the need for transparency." A muscle twitched in William's jaw, but he nodded and pulled out a chair for Patricia. Rachel hesitated before taking the seat furthest from Joshua. "Would anyone like coffee?" I offered, deliberately assuming the role of hostess to establish control of the interaction. William shook his head impatiently. "Let's get to the point. Patricia spoke with you last night. Susan, you made certain proposals. We're here to discuss terms, not proposals. William, requirements," I corrected gently. "And they're non-negotiable." William's face flushed slightly. "Everything in life is negotiable." "Not this," Joshua interjected, his voice firmer than I had ever heard it. He opened a folder and placed several documents on the table. "These are the terms for avoiding criminal charges in a civil lawsuit." The papers outlined everything we had discussed: full restitution of the $27 and $453 taken under false pretenses, signed admissions of their actions, legally binding confidentiality agreements regarding Joshua's company, and a complete severance of contact after the divorce was finalized. William scanned the documents, his expression darkening. "This is extortion." "No," Joshua replied calmly. "This is the consequence of systematic fraud. The law calls what you did theft by deception and wire fraud since you used electronic transfers. Both are felonies." Patricia placed a restraining hand on William's arm. "We're prepared to return the money," she said, her voice carefully modulated. "But these admissions of wrongdoing could destroy our reputation if they became public." "You should have considered that before you began taking advantage of my son," I said. Rachel finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Joshua, please. This has all spiraled out of control. Yes, we asked for help more often than we should have. Yes, sometimes we exaggerated our needs. But we're family. Families make mistakes." Joshua looked directly at his wife for the first time. "Was it a mistake when you wrote to your parents about splitting my bonus? When you forwarded them confidential information from my company? When you planned a lawsuit designed to either extort a settlement or destroy my career?" Rachel paled. "You read my emails. You left them in my deleted items folder." Joshua replied. "Not very careful for someone executing such an elaborate scheme." William leaned forward, abandoning the pretense of negotiation. "Let me be clear. If you pursue criminal charges, we will fight them. It will be your word against ours. Yes, you have emails, but we have explanations. We have character witnesses. We have resources you can't imagine." His threat hung in the air, but I noticed the slight tremor in his hand as he spoke. William Thompson was afraid. "Actually," I said quietly, "we have more than emails. We have statements from your other victims like Nancy Parker, who you borrowed $5,000 from and never repaid, like James Wilson, who invested in your non-existent business venture, like Barbara Delaney, who has documented your lavish lifestyle while you claimed financial hardship." I removed my own folder from my purse and placed it on the table. "We have bank records showing Rachel receiving kickbacks. We have property records proving your house has been paid off for years, despite the mortgage assistance you requested. We have grocery receipts showing champagne purchases on the same days you claimed to need money for utilities." With each item I listed, the Thompsons seemed to physically shrink. "Most importantly," I continued, "we have the district attorney's interest. I spoke with her this morning. Based on the documentation we've provided, she believes there's sufficient evidence to pursue charges of organized fraud." This was a slight exaggeration. We had an appointment with the assistant district attorney. Not a commitment to prosecute, but the effect on the Thompsons was immediate and satisfying. Patricia's composure cracked first. "William, we need to consider their terms." William's face had gone from flushed to ashen. "We don't have that kind of money immediately available. The home equity loan has been denied." I finished for him. "Yes, we know. But you have assets you can liquidate. The country club membership, Patricia's jewelry collection, the European vacation you've booked for next month." Rachel looked at her parents in shock. "You're still planning the Italy trip you told me we were broke." The moment of realization that she too had been manipulated by her parents flickered across Rachel's face. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. William's shoulders sagged in defeat. "Fine. We'll sign your papers. We'll pay the money back. Just keep this quiet. Joshua nodded once, decisively. You have 3 days to transfer the full amount. The signed documents must be notarized and delivered to my attorney by 5 p.m. tomorrow. After that, all communication goes through legal channels until the divorce is finalized. And if we comply, Patricia asked, her voice small. The criminal charges will not be pursued, Joshua confirmed. But the documentation remains with our attorney. If you ever attempt to contact me or my mother again, or if you use any information about my company, everything goes directly to the district attorney. The Thompsons exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then William nodded stiffly. We accept your terms. The meeting concluded with an awkward silence as William signed the preliminary agreement Joshua had prepared. Rachel remained seated as her parents rose to leave, her eyes fixed on the table. I did love you, she said softly to Joshua when we were almost alone. At the beginning, Joshua's expression didn't change. But you loved their lifestyle more. Rachel didn't deny it. She simply gathered her purse and followed her parents out the door. When they were gone, Joshua let out a long, shaky breath. Is it really over? I reached across the table and took his hand. The worst part is, now comes the rebuilding. And in that moment, looking at my son's face weary but resolute, I knew we had won not just a confrontation, but the first battle in his journey back to trust and happiness. 1 year later, I sat on a bench in Goodale Park, watching the autumn leaves drift lazily to the ground. The air had that particular October crispness that always reminded me of new beginnings, perhaps because my teaching career had started in the fall, or because Joshua was born in October. Speaking of my son, he was walking toward me now, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the nearby cafe. At his side was Lauren Carter, the science teacher he had met through Mike's wife 6 months ago. She was laughing at something Joshua had said, her face turned up to his with genuine warmth. Mom, Joshua called, quickening his pace. Sorry we're late. The faculty meeting ran long. I stood to embrace them both, noting with pleasure the easy way they moved together, the natural rhythm of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than calculation. Worth the wait, I assured him, accepting the coffee gratefully. How are your students this semester, Lauren? Curious and exhausting, as always, she replied with a laugh. 5th graders have endless questions about everything. We settled on the bench, enjoying the peaceful park and catching up on each other's lives. Joshua had received a promotion at his company, a direct result of the security improvements he had implemented after the Thompson situation. Lauren's science program had just been awarded a grant for new equipment. My volunteer work at the community center was expanding to include a financial literacy program for seniors. Life had found a new, healthier rhythm for all of us. Have you heard anything? Lauren asked cautiously, knowing the subject was still tender. Joshua shook his head. Not directly. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago, as you know, according to Mike's mother, who still lives near Dublin. The Thompsons have put their house on the market. Apparently, they're moving to Florida. Running from their reputation, I murmured. Probably, Joshua agreed. The country club revoked William's membership after the truth about their finances came out. And Rachel's cousin, the one whose engagement party they threw with Joshua's money, stopped speaking to them when she learned what they'd done. I squeezed his hand. How do you feel about it all now? Joshua considered the question seriously, as he always did. Relieved, he said finally. Sad for what could have been, if it had been real, but mostly grateful. Grateful, Lauren asked, surprised. Joshua nodded. Grateful that Mom saw what I couldn't. Grateful that I discovered the truth before they could do more damage. He glanced at me with a small smile. And grateful that I learned to trust my instincts again, which led me to you. Lauren blushed slightly, the autumn sun catching the highlights in her brown hair. The money came in handy too, Joshua added. Once the Thompsons repaid everything, I was able to pay off my car and start saving for a house again. What he didn't mention was that he had insisted on giving me $10,000 of the repaid money, despite my protests. For all those extra shifts you worked to put me through college, he had said firmly, consider it delayed compensation. The amount had transformed my retirement. allowing me to repair my aging car, replace my worn furniture, and even take a small vacation to visit my sister in Arizona. For the first time in decades, I wasn't counting every penny with anxiety. As we walked through the park, enjoying the crisp afternoon, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The Thompsons had indeed transferred the full amount within the deadline, though William had called Joshua's attorney twice attempting to negotiate a payment plan instead. When reminded of the criminal charges waiting in the wings, he had somehow found the resources after all. Rachel had sent Joshua one letter after moving out of their shared home. It was part apology, part justification, claiming she had been raised to see money as the ultimate security and had never learned to distinguish between needs and wants. Joshua had read it once, then filed it away without responding. Some betrayals went too deep for words to bridge. "Oh, I almost forgot," Lauren said, breaking into my thoughts. "Mrs. Abernathy from my school asked if you would consider giving a talk to our parent group about financial safety for seniors. She was so impressed with the presentation you did at the community center." I smiled, pleased by the invitation. "I'd be happy to. It's become something of a mission for me, helping others avoid what happened to Joshua. Mom's becoming a local celebrity with her Don't Be Deceived workshops," Joshua said with pride. "The senior center has a waiting list now." It was true. In the aftermath of our ordeal with the Thompsons, I had channeled my experience into educational programs for vulnerable populations, particularly seniors who might be targeted by family members or scammers. Each session I led strengthened my resolve to transform our painful experience into something that helped others. As we neared the park exit, Joshua cleared his throat nervously. "Mom, there's something Lauren and I wanted to talk to you about." I glanced between them, noting their matching expressions of suppressed excitement. "We've been talking about the future," Joshua continued, taking Lauren's hand. "About what we want and where we're headed." My heart swelled with hope, but I kept my expression neutral. After the Thompson experience, I had promised myself never to push Joshua toward any relationship decision, no matter how much I might approve of Lauren. "We're not rushing anything," Lauren clarified quickly. "We've only been dating 6 months, but we know what we have is real," Joshua finished. "And part of planning for the future is finding the right place to live." I nodded, waiting for them to continue. "There's a duplex for sale on Bryden Road," Joshua explained. 2 complete units with a connecting door that can be opened or closed. Lauren and I would take one unit, and..." He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "We were hoping you might consider taking the other." I blinked in surprise. "You want me to live next door to you?" "Only if you want to," Lauren hastened to add. "We know you value your independence. The units are completely separate, with private entrances. But the option to connect them is there, especially as we think about the future and possibly children someday." The thoughtfulness of their offer brought tears to my eyes. Unlike the Thompsons, who had viewed family connections as opportunities for exploitation, Joshua and Lauren saw them as opportunities for mutual support and love. "I'd like to see this duplex," I said carefully. "It sounds promising." Their matching smiles were answer enough. Later that evening, after viewing the property, which was indeed perfect, with a sunny garden space between the units and enough privacy for everyone, I sat alone in my apartment reflecting on our journey. The pain of watching Joshua discover Rachel's betrayal had been excruciating. The confrontation with the Thompsons had required courage I wasn't sure I possessed. The rebuilding of trust and security had been slow, deliberate work. But sitting there, planning a move to a new home where I would be close to my son and his future family while maintaining my independence, I felt a profound sense of rightness. We had not just survived the Thompsons' deception, we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more appreciative of genuine connection. My phone chimed with a text from Joshua. "Thank you for considering the duplex, and thank you for everything else. I wouldn't be where I am without you. Love you." "Mom," I typed back. "Love you too. Always have, always will." As I set the phone down, I thought about what I would tell the parents at Lauren's school about financial safety and family trust. I would tell them that kindness should never mean blindness, that love meant protecting those we care about, even when the truth is painful, that sometimes the greatest act of devotion is having the courage to expose deception rather than preserve a comfortable illusion. Most of all, I would tell them that while trust broken can leave deep scars, trust rebuilt with care and intention creates bonds stronger than they were before. The Thompsons had underestimated us. They had seen an aging nurse and her generous son as easy targets, failing to recognize the resilience forged through years of overcoming obstacles together. They had mistaken kindness for weakness, never understanding that the strongest people are often those who choose compassion despite knowing how cruel the world can be. As I began packing books into boxes for the upcoming move, I smiled at the memory of William Thompson's face when he realized we had outmaneuvered him. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, about standing firm against those who would exploit goodness for their own gain. And in the end, that stand had not only recovered what was taken from us materially, it had restored something far more precious, the certainty that genuine love, unlike the counterfeit version the Thompsons trafficked in, could withstand even the harshest betrayals and emerge purified, like gold tested in fire. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and let me know the city you're watching from. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to check out 2 other channel favorites, My Daughter-in-Law Erased Me from Family Photos, and The Will My Children Never Expected. Thanks for listening to my story.